Here we go. Good morning, explorers. Today we're exploring some more gaming news in the cosmic ocean. Last week, DLSS 5 was a pretty big topic, so we're going to cover that. I have two videos that I've curated that I think sum up this whole entire announcement slash post-announcement drama. And we're going to go through it. And of course, I'm going to give my 2 cents. We are on Twitch recording this live, and this will be edited and uploaded to YouTube. Hello, YouTube. So if you do want to watch live recordings and participate in conversation, you can follow me over on Twitch. I'm also Aprylnators over there as well. So our first video, we have Digital Foundry, actually their initial reaction to the Nvidia DLSS 5 announcement. And this reaction specifically turned out to be kind of controversial. From what I gathered, Digital Foundry maybe seemed a little too optimistic about it. AI is a pretty touchy subject with some people, and for myself, I think before we actually get into the video, I want to kind of preface I think it was last week or the week before, I made some comments where I was stating that I would really love a proper upscaling of Final Fantasy VII. Some suggestions were that, oh, well, there are AI assisted like mods that will upscale this. And my reaction to that was, no, that's not what I'm looking for. I want something that Square Enix puts out, like that they put their seal of approval on. That being said, I'm not 100% against AI, and I never have been. I'm not a fan of low quality AI slop type generative artwork being used as in place of like human artists. I think it's fine for personal applications if you want to create reference material for your own work, that kind of stuff. I've used it for quick backgrounds and assets here on the channel. And one is just because I can't always afford to pay an artist, and I would like to. And if I had the budget for it, I absolutely would. But I don't think that in 2026, a content creator needs to go completely without having assets for the sake of their budget, right? But you should definitely support human artists when you can. I do definitely do that. But yeah, so that's my standing opinion on AI. It's an opinion that has definitely evolved and changed as time goes by. But that's where I'm currently at with it. AI does have some useful applications, but I think as we're going to see here, this one, I have some mixed opinions about it, and we'll definitely get into that. Okay, let's start the video.
Hello there, and welcome to a DF Direct special. We are at GTC at San Jose in America, and we have just seen DLSS 5. And I think it's fair to say that it's one of the most surprising, potentially disruptive, transformative, next generation technologies we've seen.
Oh man, like disruptive is a good word to describe it. I don't know. I like just going off of these two things right here that we've seen, and these shots from Resident Evil 9 have been all over Twitter. They're going to be on my thumbnail. They'll be on everybody's thumbnails. But like, I do not like these transformations. They're not in line with what the developers were originally going for.
Actually, machine learning is being brought to lighting. The attempt being to bring focus.
This especially, oh my god, this transformation right here really bothers me because I do not think that they like took this from the level of like handsome to more handsome. It just looks like he has that weird like Giga Chad filter over him. I really, thanks, I hate it. What in the hell?
Photorealism to the games of today and indeed tomorrow.
Like this one kind of looks all right. Again, this is not the studio that is putting the seal of approval on this. This is only Nvidia doing this. I don't know. In the next video, we're going to get into exactly how this, like some of how this works and what the developers thought when they saw these things.
Oliver McKenzie, you're joining me. You saw the demo as well.
Yes, Rich. I think this is probably the most impressive by quite a lot game demo I've seen in my time at Digital Foundry. So I think it's definitely.
What do you guys think of this? Do you think it's impressive
it's a very
or no?
special technology showcase, I would say.
Yeah, I think we should kick off with what is DLSS 5. Well, how do you describe it, Oliver? I mean, it is basically an attempt to, well, you know, traditionally you would see like an increase in hardware technology performance that would enable new lighting techniques. But I think what Nvidia are essentially trying to do is kind of like bypass all of that, taking us like a generation or two beyond lighting as it's seen today, and it's done entirely through machine learning. It completely
changes the lighting in cinematography, and also this applies to games as well. The way that the lighting is and the color palette, all of these like tiny choices they're made with intention. I don't foresee this understanding the nuance behind those decisions. The lighting shift really, in my opinion, the mood shifts with the change. That's not true to the source material.
DLSS that is complementary to the existing ones, frame generation and super resolution. So yeah, it's basically like a new string to the bow of DLSS. But you know, I think our first point of contact was
it almost feels like a different season.
This particular image of Resident Evil Requiem, where we saw this sequence here. So that's the original past-facing version that you're seeing there, and then kind of like the DLSS 5 take on it. Oliver, what do you think of this? Because this is like quite extraordinary. We honestly, when we saw this for the first time, we didn't know actually what DLSS 5 was.
Yeah, this just blew me away. So basically you have Grace there in this scene. This is kind of a very famous scene from the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And obviously the path traced render has a great lighting detail, but then they swap over to DLSS 5. The first thing that I think sticks out to anyone here is the fidelity and realism in Grace's face. And it's almost like we've integrated a grab bag of graphical techniques here in one fell swoop. Grace's skin has a much more convincing specular response with quickly diffused specular highlights. Her hair is lit more realistically as strands closer to her scalp are occluded more heavily. Her eyes
the
have
fidelity is
specular
definitely
highlights, and they appear much more realistic and lifelike, I would say. When you're looking at things like the specular response in her jacket, those things are much more true to life as well. The lighting in the background is also considerably enhanced, especially when you look at elements like this lamp post here. Where in the DLSS 5 view, it looks much more convincingly reflective, like a real lamp post would behave in wet weather conditions. I think the kind of apparent aesthetic changes to Grace's face here will perhaps be most controversial, but throughout the other demos that we saw and the other shots that we saw in these games, I wasn't seeing nearly as much of a difference in terms of that DLSS 5 view of the character relative to a ray traced or path traced view of the same character.
So I think this is dramatically different from ray tracing, where ray tracing did like just introduce like a higher fidelity. But in the case of like Grace's photo, here, let's go back to that slightly. It's where we can see her face. Yeah, so with like the background blurrier than it was, that puts focus on Grace's face more than it would if like everything is in focus. You in like let me compose my thoughts here. In real life, when you're focusing on something, everything else is not in focus. It's like a bokeh effect. We love that in photography, right? We love seeing that in cinematography. Why the hell would we not want that in gaming? Because it looks freaking awesome. It tells you exactly where the intended focus is supposed to be within that frame. This applies to video as well as still images. That bokeh effect is it creates a depth in there that you can use that. A developer, an art director, an artist can use that to their advantage when they're trying to create emotion and inflection and guide their eye to a specific spot. If you have a filter that comes along and is just going to flat out like make everything more like high fidelity just because it thinks it should be like that, you're losing something here. You're losing that the source material, and now you've just taken out. In my opinion, I feel like it, you know, in a case like this, like your Grace's brighter in this photo, but I mean, you're kind of robbing yourself of the experience, I think, of the source material by having everything. And I just don't really like how this looks. I don't really like how we don't need a ton of realism just because we can. Give me more stylized artwork, please. Please. Okay, Lone says, for me, when it comes to things like this, of course I want my games to look good, but I feel like that most developers focus too much on it to the point where the story and gameplay suffer. Pretty sure my PC would explode if it tried to run graphics like that. Both of those are such great points. The story should be paramount to the visuals, in my opinion, but also, like, this in a sense is like taking away from the story that doesn't need to be focused on at this much depth. And the pretty sure your PC would explode thing, nobody that I know of, even people that are maybe what I would consider like gaming enthusiast level, are going to be able to run this on their rigs. I believe this footage that we're seeing right now is requiring 25090 GPUs, something 250 generation GPUs to make this happen. The lips look AI generated. Yeah, it looks like a TikTok filter to me. The whole thing does. I don't think that TikTok filters are a value add, and I don't really think this is either.
More convincingly reflective, like a real app post would behave.
Yeah, see, so I think like you can zoom in and be like, oh yeah, look at the fidelity. So when we think of it in this light as a tool that maybe like a developer might use, where they're like, oh yeah, let's turn on DLSS 5 to amp up these graphics. But this is not something that is for developers. This is for consumers in, like, after the game has been made and published. This is not something that developers will be able to use and apply how they see fit during game development. And I feel like that's inherently problematic. Bro, no gamer is going to be looking that hard to notice that. True. I appreciate really nice environment design, but I mean, for the most part, we're here for that overall experience. These little tiny nuanced details they're not as important as Jensen Huang thinks they are.
In wet weather conditions. I think the kind of apparent aesthetic changes to Grace's face here will perhaps be most controversial, but throughout the other demos that we saw and the other shots that we saw in these games, I wasn't seeing nearly as much of a difference.
It makes her
in
look
terms of
older.
That DLSS 5 view of the character relative to
I don't like
it.
it. It changes her too much.
Yeah, I think the important thing to point out, though, is that it's not actually replacing assets as such. So geometry, I think that's quite remarkable, because the geometry looks different on that Grace shot, but it's not. It's the same geometry. It's the same texture assets. It's simply going through a different form of lighting that, from Nvidia's perspective, is kind of like next generation and transformative. And when you first see that shot, it's quite different.
Okay, he said that this is going through a different form of lighting, and that is, I think, inherently false. There's detail being added to the shape of her eyes and the facial features that were not there before, that are essentially being hallucinated by the AI. As Isaiah says, I mean, anybody would complain the design was AI generated. Yeah, in current climate, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we're all suffering through the burden of computer components being astronomical in price. I got me and Rom some little external hard drives for Christmas, and I just noticed that those same hard drives that I picked up on sale for like $60 a pop, they're little 1 terabyte hard drives, that same brand of hard drive just got up to $360. What the hell? So yeah, if you're somebody who is just hating on the entire tech because of that kind of, like, warranted, you have every right to be upset about this, and you have every right to, I think, be upset to not like of having this stuff be pushed into every aspect where it can be pushed into, which is like, I get frustrated with it for that reason. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
AI does have some valuable applications, but I don't think this is it. I think this is kind of a bunch of crap. I have played in 100% Resident Evil 9, got all the achievements, everything, so I can say with full confidence that the game is already pretty real. Graphic looks great, and my setup is kind of unnecessary. Oh, and this is kind of the setup is kind of unnecessary. Yeah. I mean, and I feel like your sentiment, Lona, is like pretty spot on with what a lot of people thought. They were like, you took a good game and a very beloved franchise, and this specific title has been extremely well received. And then you were like, it's not good enough. We need to add our TikTok filter to it. Like, what are we doing here?
Difficult to argue with that. I mean, you know, when you flick between the two, which one would you rather play? It's a bit of a no-brainer, isn't it?
You mean to say the game looks pretty real? Yeah, it looks fine, and I think it looked better. I don't think it's an improvement to have this DLSS 5 on it. All of the footage, I don't play scary games like that usually, but like all the footage that I've seen of it, the game looks great as is.
Interesting about this is Nvidia's stated intention for the technology. They're kind of like looking at this as almost kind of like trying to anticipate the original fully real.
Oh, I hate it. This character is so freaking handsome and attractive. It is like this character design is like probably one of the hottest characters that has been in the franchise like so far, right? Like, and this filter is like, it just makes him look so weird. And again, going back to that stupid Giga Chad like filter thing, like that's all this looks like. This is all I can see, and it looks stupid.
Vision of the game developers here. This demo is actually quite interesting in terms of its technical makeup.
Completely changes the color palette.
It's using an RTX 5090 to run the past-face version of Resident Evil, but there's a second 5090 that's actually doing the DLSS 5 pass there. But the intention is, this is a very early demo.
Look, you could buy a damn car with the price that those two GPUs would cost to put this TikTok filter onto your game. They massacred my boy, put him back to the way he was. Yeah, for real. Like, what are they doing? He was beautiful and they made him look so weird. Dang, what did they do to your video game crush, right? All the Leon fans out there are like pissed, I'm sure. What did you do?
Keep calling it like a snapshot of current development for the model. Yeah. So they're expecting changes, they're expecting improvements, but crucially, they're expecting to be able to do this on one GPU. In fact, they are doing it on one GPU in their labs right now, but in terms of getting like full speed performance for the demo, they wanted to actually run it on a second one, but they're looking to continually optimize.
Yeah, and they did say that they do have it running, like you said, on one GPU. And they basically made it clear that the VRAM requirements at this stage aren't so steep. Right. It couldn't run on a single consumer GeForce GPU, so presumably like a 5090 GPU.
So maybe it doesn't necessarily need it, but
that's obviously not the intent. They want to ship it. They intend to ship it on single GPU systems when this launches in fall of 2026.
Yeah, which isn't so far away.
No, it's not so far away.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, I think maybe if we look at some of the other demos here, I think Starfield is a really interesting one because the base imagery, of course, is not ray-traced, not path-traced. And yet we're still seeing transformative changes here, particularly in terms of character rendering, which is an area where Starfield received quite a lot of criticism. But again, the effect is quite remarkable here, isn't it?
Yeah, and I found this very interesting. So we saw this through a variety of games.
I don't like it.
They really do intend for that base render that's going into this, the base color, the base motion vectors, the base render to be as high quality as possible.
Like completely, the lighting change is a problem. This is not, the more I look at this, the more, now that we're really taking a a much closer, now that I'm taking a much closer look at this, like I'm hating it more and more. These last examples, like it just between it being on and off is such a tonal change. It changes the whole feeling of the scene. The funny thing is you never played Resident Evil and you feel bad for everyone. I mean, I haven't played it either, but I mean, I know of it and I've watched streamers playing it. So like, I kind of feel like I played it. I feel like I can still have opinions on a game I didn't play. You can too.
Possible. Starfield obviously has some issues with its lighting. It's not ray traced, it tends to look very flat, and I thought DLSS 5 did a fantastic job enhancing details and enhancing that lighting presentation in a way that I didn't really think was possible, because all of a sudden you've got this game that otherwise looks very flat, otherwise has a kind of last generation appearance in some respects.
The lighting is like, it's almost like a different time of day.
But there are still some issues though, like you can note screen space errors in certain games where like you have screen space reflections or screen space ambient occlusion, and those things are breaking up in the DLSS 5 image. So it's not like it's perfectly understanding and reconstructing all characteristics of light. It's still depending on the base render, but it's super impressive to see a game like Starfield, to see this character's jacket, for instance, all the specular highlights cast in a much more realistic light, the material properties along her clothing there, and indeed in her face, this colossal increase in lighting fidelity, where all of a sudden you're seeing proper subsurface scattering, her eyes are properly self-shadowing.
I don't know,
and her mouth is also
I keep
shadowing
going
her
back
teeth
to
correctly.
unnecessary.
And all these other characteristics that they pointed out to us that you don't really think about in the context of real-time rendering.
Nobody
because
asked for
you're
this.
so used to a lower quality image than what, you know, high-end CG could provide. But all of a sudden, we're kind of in the realm of high-end CG with this technology.
Absolutely, yeah. There are plenty of demos.
I think had NVIDIA worked on a tool that they could maybe give to developers that would allow developers to build higher fidelity appearance to games on lower spec devices, this would have been a win-win for us, because we would have still had developers in the loop and giving them control over what their game looks like. And also that would have been a win for consumers to have ability to play a higher fidelity game without necessarily having the latest gen graphics card. I feel like Jensen Huang really is missing the mark here, and it feels like every move is just to sell more units, get more compute, give Jensen Huang your money, do it now.
As that we saw, we're going to be producing a much longer video where we can talk in depth about them. Let's talk about Oblivion Remastered. It's quite an interesting showcase of what happens.
Oblivion
when you
Remastered,
introduce
already a
DLSS 5
masterpiece.
to an Unreal Engine 5 title. Software Lumen now is like radically transformed into something quite different. Character rendering again gets a gigantic revamp, I'd say.
Yeah.
And
You've never seen elves look this realistic. It's crazy.
It's just that we don't need this.
Also, it's really interesting to see the kind of, you know, the occlusion that's happening on all of the brickwork, on all of the sort of castle-like structures there. It really is quite extraordinary to see it in motion and to sort of flip between the two there. You know, windows that look completely flat and opaque now actually seem to look properly correct. Yeah, it's just quite extraordinary.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because
we got Oblivion Remastered on launch. I never played it because it won't run very well on my PC, but Rom's PC it runs beautifully on, and so I have got to go in there and see what it looks like on his PC. And Oblivion Remastered is absolutely gorgeous. They're going to be getting a Switch 2 version of that, and I'm like, my mind is blown that the Switch 2 could even run it. I've been really blown away with like playing Cyberpunk on Switch 2. It runs very, very well. There's no way that I could like have OBS, VTube Studio going and Cyberpunk at the same time on my current setup. It wouldn't be able to handle it. I don't think that the graphics card actually could maybe do it, but it's crazy that that kind of stuff will run on a Switch too. That for me gives me a lot more options as far as like what I can play like online, like because I can capture video rather than having everything going on my PC. So that's a better thing for me for sure. The playthrough of Cyberpunk is going so good. I initially played a little bit, like a few hours of it when it first launched, but the game was really buggy and I set it aside and I was like, well, I'll wait for updates. We knew that they were going to do updates. The game just had problem launch, but I think overall I believed in the project. But then I just kind of moved on to other stuff and I didn't go back to it. And it wasn't until Rom got me a copy of Cyberpunk for Switch 2 for Christmas that I started playing it. And I've been playing it with a pair of XR glasses, like just sitting like out in the living room on the couch. It's so freaking dumb. The XR glasses that I have like create like a screen essentially that's like 152 inches. So it and the sound goes like right into my ears. I got the Vitcher Cyber Luma glasses. They're like the Cyberpunk series ones. Yeah, it's essentially this pair of like sunglasses that has a screen in the inside. You can plug them in to lots of different things. So I got the accessories that will let you plug them in to the Switch undocked. And it also acts as a battery pack. I can plug them directly into my phone. I can plug them into like, you can plug them into a PC if the PC has like a USB-C like video out. So like most laptops have that. And yeah, it gives you like a private screen to watch stuff on. It's really cool because me and Rom can be sitting in the living room and watching something on maybe we're watching YouTube on the TV and Rom is playing a game on, Steam Deck. And then I am playing a game on Switch with my glasses on, my XR glasses on, like doing my own thing, listening to what's going on. The Vitcher ones that I got, they start at $3.99. There are cheaper ones available. It just depends on what features that you're after. But I think they're really awesome. Like a new like piece of tech that I got myself as an early birthday present, and and I've been having a blast with them, and I'm excited to see like where that goes, because I think with like the like smart glasses that I've seen that have like the clear screens, those are more for like viewing an app in a smaller window while you're out and about and you can see through them. The XR glasses that I have, these are not for putting on and like walking around. I wouldn't do that with them. I do wear them on the treadmill. They're great for that because I'm like stationary. I'm not going to run into anything. Yeah, they're more for like having a private like viewing experience. Really, really large screen, and I think they're fantastic. If you guys want me to do like a separate video maybe where I kind of go into like the ones that I got and the accessories that I got with it and that experience, maybe I'll put something together offline and talk more about it. But yeah, I'm excited. Definitely getting Oblivion when it comes to Switch 2. I think it's going to be really, really awesome. Maybe you should get a pair of those to wear at work. No one would even know I'm watching YouTube. I mean, yeah, like you can't really. They make a little bit of noise if you're really close. But for the most part, like, yeah, you kind of can't. You can kind of tell that they're not normal glasses. But like if you're in like a break room at work and you're like watching something on your lunch hour, like that's like a really good case for them because nobody's going to know what you're watching. You're not being disruptive to anybody really around you. They're advertised a lot for like, oh, if you're traveling on a plane, you can watch these glasses. Or like if you're waiting at the doctor's office, you can play a game on these glasses, like watch your stuff. And yeah, so they're really awesome for that.
Old lighting in the game I thought generally looked quite handsome. Like I'm not opposed to Lumen, and obviously Lumen takes some shortcuts, but here you're really just seeing all that kind of very coarse lighting detail brought out to like a really granular level where you get really tight shadows all of a sudden underneath awnings where the light is spilling out over the scene in a much more realistic manner where you're getting those contact shadows.
Okay. Listen, I absolutely prefer the warmer lighting with the DLSS 5 off in this game. The DLSS 5 on immediately cools all of the colors on the palette. It like just changes the overall temperature. That in turn changes the vibe for me. This is warmer, this is inviting, this is better as it is. It doesn't need this filter.
And it's just a markedly improved presentation. Even they pointed out like some of the character models in the game are a little bit on the simpler side, but they still look a lot better when we put DLSS 5 on. I mean, they look
Yeah, you're right. It does ruin like the whole atmosphere for sure. It makes it's like almost washed out, but not. I don't like that. Like it's just like an upping of the brightness. It changes things in not a way that I think is favorable.
a little bit uncanny, I would say, but definitely the overall portrayal of those characters is much more sophisticated.
Yeah. And we also took a quick look at Assassin's Creed Shadows here, which is quite remarkable in how it's handling environmental lighting and shadow there. It's, you know, it's radically transformed.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. Obviously, Assassin's Creed Shadows is a game that is a very handsome title, I would say. In general, it was obviously part of our Graphics of the Year list last year. But when we look at that base render, we see there are some issues with like shadow maps, and maybe the detailing in the foliage lighting is not quite as granular as you'd like. You move over to DLSS 5 and all those issues are basically fixed. Like all of a sudden the game looks like it has ray traced shadows when in fact, of course, we know that it does not. And like the fog is integrated much more nicely
What?
into the scene. The overall lighting presentation is just...
Wait, look at they're not. I hate that they're not commenting on how it changes the color palette so much. Color palette is so important to all of the design that goes into these games. They don't choose these colors like arbitrarily. These are intentional decisions that are made. This is really kind of pissing me off.
dramatically improved to the point where if you were squinting or even not really squinting, you could mistake this for an image of a real life forest, I'd have to say.
Yeah,
It's
they are
very apparent. It's very apparent to me that Digital Foundry, they always really talk like very techy about everything. So I think they're fun to watch, but in this instance, like they don't have any artistic like background. It feels like at all because they're really like not noticing this, and I think it's very important. I went to college for this shit. Most of the things he is mentioning, most people wouldn't notice unless you told them, and depending on the person, they still couldn't tell. Yeah. Yeah, I think I honestly I think that people are going to notice the color shift and that mood shift, and you might not be able to articulate exactly why it sucks, but your brain understands that there's something shifted there that is off. And I think that's what most people like will latch onto, that like if they don't have a lot of like technical knowledge, or they don't have a lot of like the color theory and like or like any kind of like artistic types of background, they're going to notice something's weird. And then those minute like fidelity details, unless you're stopping to look really close at things in your gameplay, nobody's going to they're not going to care, they're not going to notice. And we kind of saw this with ray tracing too, in my opinion. Ray tracing is available. I generally turn it off because it's more of a novelty than anything else at this point, because the ray tracing does nothing to enhance the story of a game. It has nothing to do with how the game feels to play, like how maybe like the gunplay is, how the movement of the character is, the mechanics of the game. Ray tracing doesn't do anything for that, and you can have a really good game without it.
To bring photorealism to games with this, which I think is quite interesting, but also quite controversial as well.
And you get
because
better
this
performance
is
when
basically
it's off.
Today's game engines viewed through the lens of Nvidia's AI model. And I think it's fair to say that there's going to be a lot of discussion about whether this is the right direction.
Yeah.
A lot of discussion about whether this is actually what the the kind of ultimate intent of the developer actually is.
Yeah.
And I also
We're
think
going to find out later it's not.
the way the technology works is it actually integrates into NVIDIA Streamline.
Right.
So although developers can actually tune DLSS 5 lighting seemingly to be what they want it to be, there's going to be a lot of DLSS 5 mods happening to a lot of games, whether the developers like it or not, I think.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine that someone is going to get this in Optiscaler, and it's going to be a bit of a wild ride. But yeah, I mean, they even discussed, I spoke with one of the engineers on this project, and he mentioned that you could apply it to games as primitive as Minecraft and get like a Minecraft RTX style appearance. So this does not just apply to AAA games. It does not just apply to high-end graphics. We're already seeing that a little bit with Starfield, which is a more primitive title, but it really could apply to just about any game that can supply color and motion vectors, I guess. And obviously that's going to be a matter of controversy. We've already heard that some developers are on board with the technique, that they really like it. They think it enhances their games, brings them up to the visual fidelity that they had imagined in their heads but could not deliver. But obviously...
it's okay. Listen, I am hating on this more than I intended to. I was expecting to come into this being like, well, you know, some of it looks good and some of it doesn't, and you know, just trying to keep an open mind. I think this looks like ass. I really do. I don't like it at all. It's way too much of a tone change. It's way too much of a color palette change, and also it okay. Let's go back. I need to articulate this a little bit better. Look at the texture of the buildings and how it changes from off to on. AI can do things that are, in my opinion, good. It's good when it's good, and it's really bad when it's really bad.
On board with the technique, that they really like it. They think it enhances their games, brings them up to the visual fidelity that they had imagined in their heads but could not.
Okay. Okay, wait. Back a little bit.
That they had imagined it.
Okay, so this is off. The wood. Okay, so we have like the wood, I don't know if this is like kind of like a stucco on the walls. Like it has this like warm, rich feel to it. These lines, like they're a little bit farther back, so there's that little bit of depth blur that should be there. That's natural. That feels natural. You can see the little details in the windows. When you get way back here, like the church door and everything, this just looks like properly out of focus, as it should. This is beautiful, like as it is. Now let's look at it with the ass filter on.
In their heads but could not deliver.
Now everything in this looks like it's AI generated. Like this doesn't even look like this building right here in particular. I'm just a lot of problem with. There are so many shadows on this church way back in here. This is a detail that this filter has added in. Like, I mean, there's detail if you go and walk up to it, but in what scenario did you need this? And now all of the color in the wood and the stucco is like washed out. Yeah, anybody calling this AI slop is right. I agree with you. This is this is an AI slop filter that they've created here, and I don't foresee myself using this at all, even if I had the hardware to do it.
But obviously this is going to be a work in progress. And I'd also say that perhaps there could be some additional, they mentioned some tuning that might be involved, some exclusions that might be involved in this model in order to get it to a level where developers...
It makes it look so bad.
Yeah, and it is still work in progress, although we are expecting this to be delivered.
It's not. This is not an improvement.
Which I still think is like quite a remarkable proposition. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of work still.
And this is no doubt going to be used as a gimmick to sell cards later, right? Like we would be able to tack on a little bit extra money now because this graphics card, this new gen graphics card is capable of DLSS 5. Give us some more money. And it's going to be there and capable whether you wanted it or not, whether you needed it or not. So like just pushing forward, you know, it's kind of like, let me sidestep a little bit and bitch about smart TVs for a moment, because a lot of us have an external smart device for your TV that you watch apps through. In my experience, the built-in smart features to the TV are really terrible, that I still will buy an external device for every single TV in the house because they work better. You cannot go and buy a regular TV without those smart features built into it. And TVs were getting extremely cheap. They're already like pretty cheap if you shop them on Black Friday. If you're in the US, that's the only time you should shop for a TV. But they would be even cheaper if they didn't build that bullshit in there that you're never going to use. They need to stop building TVs that have that smart feature in, but by putting a little bit of hardware inside of that TV, now you can jack the price up a little bit more or a lot more. And because, hey, look we put all of these features in there and you're going to pay for that whether you use it or not. And I think that's how this is going to be too. This is going to be some bullshit tacked on that you may not use. I mean, I'm not going to use this. I don't like it. I don't like how it looks. And I want to play a game that the developers made in a way that the developers intended for it to look. I'm not a big fan of mods. I have very rarely ever played any games with mods. I kind of am a purist, I guess, like that. I just want to play the game the way that the developer intended to play it. And if the developer wants to make a remake or a remaster of their game, great, because the developer chose to do that. Nvidia didn't throw a filter on for you and call it a day. All right, rant over.
To do on this, the concept that they're using two 5090s effectively to bring this demo to us today and somehow rationalizing that down to one, that's going to be quite an interesting experience, I think.
Yeah, just one 5090 is ambitious enough, but then you got to...
It's bad when I'm using more swear words than usual. I'm so mad right now. It's got me all fired up.
I think about the rest of NVIDIA's stack and the 5070s, the 5070s, 5080s. Could those cards run this? Again, that's kind of an open question at the moment. I think it's probably their intent that those cards could run a version of this. And we did hear as well that this should scale. I mean, if the VRAM question can be settled, this should scale reasonably well with output resolution is what we heard. So potentially like this at 4K with two 5090s, maybe it goes down to one 5090, hopefully of 4K for many games. And then perhaps the other cards are capable of it at 1440p or 1080p.
Yeah, so it is a separate component to frame generation and DLSS super resolution. So you kind of like still choose your settings, so to speak. I think it's also going to be quite interesting to see how the presentation changes according to the input settings that you choose from the quality menus and whatnot. What does DLSS 5's take on ray tracing look like versus path tracing or without ray tracing at all? That's going to be quite interesting as well. But
there is such a thing as too much realism, and this not only crosses that line, but speeds past it. I agree with you 100%. And I think that we've seen that in recent years with the introduction of Unreal Engine 5, and I find myself like consistently complaining about the overall look of games that have been created in that engine. There's some good ones, don't get me wrong, but there's just really something about a game that has its own flavor of stylized art that I absolutely love. I'm going to throw out Borderlands as an example because I believe like the latest version Borderlands is Unreal, but it's got that layer of stylized art over it. Perfect way to do that. The game looks very appealing. It's memorable. It takes you literally to another world that you have never seen before unless you played other Borderlands games. And then we look at, what was it, the new Halo, where it's just trying to like kind of go for like as much realism as it possibly can. And there's something kind of boring about that for me. I live in the real world. I see real stuff all the time. And I don't necessarily need to go there every time I play a video game. I'm a little bit sick of these like these titles kind of vying for that because it just photorealism I don't think was ever the goal. I don't think it's that impressive. I don't care. What is impressive, if you could show me an art style I've never seen before, that's cool. That's a really cool. Now I'm impressed. Now I'm intrigued. But show me a tree that looks like a tree. Okay, cool, but I already saw that. I use video games to escape the real world. I don't need to be reminded of it. Yeah, right? Like, I want to be taken to another universe when I am playing a video game. I want to be completely out of here and mentally, visually somewhere else. If you're not giving me that experience, then like, what are you even doing? You're just missing the mark.
There's just so many questions. I think we're still struggling to kind of process all of this.
You know, it's such a leap in computer graphics. I mean, it's almost getting beyond computer graphics and into neural rendering. You are supplying a game image, you are supplying imagery from a game engine. Granted, it's sophisticated imagery from a game engine, but then you're getting this greatly enhanced lighting presentation just because this model understands lighting, understands how materials interact, understands how things should behave in the real world, kind of almost better than you could program into a game engine, at least to some degree. That might be a controversial statement, but I think it's definitely true.
Yeah, I think he is buttering this up way, way more than it is now. Like, because he's comparing it to like, oh yeah, this is like on a like a neuro level. He's throwing out some like buzzwords here that I think this is kind of bullshit. Like, just arbitrarily adding more shadows and additional little details. This is not groundbreaking, and it's not impressive.
And it's just an absolutely incredible accomplishment. I cannot wait to see it. And this was running like, you know, it was running at reasonable performance level.
Okay, so yeah, it like completely changes the vines that are covering the structure here, where when it's on, you have this like larger leaves on the foliage, or when it's off, and then once it turns on, like the leaves are actually like small. Like it's a different plant now. Yeah, that doesn't fall under enhancement. It's just like a blatant change. The AI doesn't have a rhyme or reason of why it's doing this. It just knows that it's supposed to make it more pixels, right? There's not feeling and intent and emotion that are backing those decisions.
Granted, maybe there were some performance hitches here or there in certain games. We're not sure where that might have been coming from. But in general, like this.
And for those of you who play devil's advocate here, feel free to show Claude or ChatGPT some before and after images of this and ask them what they feel about this. Because I know for sure Claude will probably give you a pretty honest answer, and it's not just like, yeah, AI is great on everything it does. AI doesn't even think it's great for every single thing.
It was very performant, very real time. Rich had his hand in the controller, was manipulating these scenes. Like, this is real gameplay you're seeing here, where Rich was really manipulating. This was not a canned demo.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important because we've seen demos in the past that have been potentially transformative. The classic case being The Matrix Awakens, right, where you saw that and you thought, wow, this is the future of games. But fundamentally, it was a demo. It wasn't a game. But this is existing shipping titles running with this technology as like an extra layer on top. And man, you know, I can't wait to see more.
These are really buttering this up now. I wonder how many people thought that they were like in Nvidia's
pockets.
To be
developer buying on it
like
as
this.
Well. Nvidia was saying that Todd Howard personally signed off on this.
Yeah,
this is the way he kind of wanted his game to be seen. Was the sort of paraphrased version of that.
Yeah.
It's the way I'd certainly prefer to play Starfield.
I would definitely agree here. But yeah, that question of artistic intent, I think it's going to be one that people are talking about for a long time.
It looks so real to the point that it also doesn't look real anymore. That's the best way I can explain it. Yeah, it falls into like, I think that's Uncanny Valley. There's like a favorable area, right? Like where things look really, really good, and your fidelity or whatever can go up so high. And then it just like drops off into that Uncanny Valley where, yeah, it's like too close. But that is possibly like part of why I'm hating this so much, is that like, yeah, it's too much. It's too much. I don't like that it takes the style, the like stylization away. The scenes for Harry Potter that they incorporated in here made they made the characters look so much different. Because that game is a little bit older, so like the textures on the characters' faces and stuff so really smooth. So it's not really giving the AI a ton of stuff to work with, maybe in that aspect. And AI is just like, let's just fill it with some wrinkles and details that aren't even there. That completely changes the characters.
This technology, but I certainly can.
Look at this. They just like aged 10 years. Bravo!
See the improvement in fidelity, if nothing else. The massive improvement in fidelity, especially for games that are more realistic. I'd be very curious to see this interact with a game like Hi-Fi Rush or something.
Right, yeah.
Where like that's a very deliberate.
This kid is supposed to be a teenager, and now he looks like he's in his 20s. I've seen some shit. Bad AI, stop it.
Style, obviously. Would this do anything that you'd want in an image like that, or would it be counterintuitive? Would it be counterproductive to that game's cel-shaded visual style? Would it actually produce an interesting result? Obviously, with Minecraft, that's something you can kind of get away with, but perhaps there are games where it would be less appropriate, and presumably developers would be not enabling it for those titles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, plenty of questions still remain, but the impact of this technology, I don't think I've seen a demo quite as astonishing as this for quite some time. But I think that's all we've got to say about this right now.
Well,
right now, because we want to do a much bigger video based on everything we saw. We spent several hours looking at.
Yeah, they did. They made a follow-up to this that was a little bit of an apology,
which was a bit of a thrill for me.
Yeah, it was really exciting.
So yeah, look forward to more from Digital Foundry, but that's all from us on this one. Like, subscribe, share if you enjoyed the content.
Okay, so yeah, if you're interested in watching the follow-up video, go check out Digital Foundry's channel. I probably need to plug them too much. They're huge. They're they usually do really great technical breakdowns of new things that come out. I really like they do like technical breakdowns of comparisons between like one game and different platforms that it's available on, and show how it looks on the different like platforms. The breakdown that they did with Cyberpunk for this was like, that one I thought was like especially interesting. But yeah, I think for this, they definitely come out of the gate feeling very positive, and like it seems like they're like very like impressed with what they saw. And I have to wonder if like after this, after they thought about it a little bit more, even maybe before they read Twitter comments or comments on the video of like, what does this mean for the developers? And I think this, I don't know this for sure. This is me speculating that maybe they thought that the devs were on board with this demonstration when they filmed this and did their review, like initial review remarks of this, because it feels kind of like they did not consider how devs might feel about this just being willy-nilly applied to their game in a way that maybe drastically transformed the look and the feel of the game. I don't feel like they completely took that. I don't feel like they really touched on that very much at all in this video, and that was a failure on their part. But I do know that they do address that in a later video. But I have a second video to watch today, and that one gets into the aftermath of this announcement, the Digital Foundry looking at this, and what happened in the days that followed, because like there was definitely some people had feelings about this. I'm gonna need them to leave games like Hi-Fi Rush alone. Don't let this touch with a 10-foot pole. It's great the way it is. Exactly. Like there's some games where I'm like, no, that game, like this is beautiful in all of its you know, like lo-fi like gloriousness. People still love pixel art. I still love pixel art. Pixel art's one of my favorite art styles. Just because you can add more pixels in and shove them into all of the orifice doesn't mean you should. It really doesn't. You don't have to do that. So, okay, let's move to the next video. This is a video by YongYea, and he is talking about the engineers at Nvidia revealing the truth of exactly how this filter is functioning. And it also touches a little bit on, it kind of did both work, where it touches a little bit on like the devs being a little bit blind. They were not a little bit, but the devs were blindsided by this announcement. So he touches on that a little bit too. He did do a full video on devs kind of being like, hey, we didn't know that we were going to be in this Nvidia announcement. Apparently nobody that made games knew that they were going to be featured in this announcement. This is not Nvidia working with devs for a tool that devs could use. This is Nvidia making a TikTok filter that anybody with a strong enough GPU, you know, down the line when this gets launched is going to be able to apply to like literally every game. And I think that's what it's looking like so far. We shall see. Of course, time will tell what the truth of this actually is, but this is right now. Let's check out this YongYea video. I like YongYea. I watch him pretty regularly. I don't always agree with everything he says, but that's part of the reason why I like him, because I don't always seek media that is confirming my opinions. Because I think it keeps you grounded if you listen and watch people that are a little bit opposing as well.
So do you remember how people looked at NVIDIA's DLSS 5 tech and basically said, oh, it looks like Gen AI slop filter added on top of the game's frames?
We literally just said that.
And then CEO Jensen Huang came out and said, no, it's not just a filter. It's X, Y, and Z, and it's got all this cool tech at the geometry level.
Yeah.
Is what DLSS 5 is impacting visually, so on and so forth. And basically try to convince people that there is more to the technology than meets the eye. Well, if a recent statement from an NVIDIA engineer is to be believed, it would seem as though what DLSS 5 basically bogs down to is that it's pretty much a Gen AI slop filter layered on top of the frames and not within the game's assets itself. And I mean, NVIDIA already kind of said as much in their blog post here, where they said that this technology blends handcrafted rendering with generative AI. But the question was, where does the Gen AI aspect come in?
I mean, that verbiage makes it sound like it's more than just a top layer filter, right?
Does it come in at the frame level, or does it come in at like the 3D assets level? Well, here's what Jensen Huang would have you believe, as I've reported on this before, when NVIDIA CEO responded to the backlash and criticism by saying, well, first of all, they're completely wrong, and talked about how DLSS 5 fuses controllability of the geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. He talked about how...
Yeah, that's like a blatant oversell and overstate of what this is doing.
How it's not post-processing. It's not post-processing at the frame level. It's generative control at the geometry level, and talked about all the control that developers can have. They can fine-tune the generative AI, how it doesn't change the artistic control. All of that is in the control, direct control of the game developer, said Jensen Huang, saying that this is very different than generative AI. It's content control generative AI. That's why we call it...
Bitch, this is generative AI. That's all this is. It's just generative AI slop.
Neural rendering. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of him saying it's not Gen AI, it's Gen AI. And you're like, okay, it still uses Gen AI. But the important thing to note is that Jensen Huang insisted that it's not post-processing at the frame level, it's generative control at the geometry level. DLSS 5 doesn't read individual frames and then apply effects on top of those frames, but rather it goes into the game itself and applies the quote-unquote visual enhancements on top of the game itself. Well, that's a stark contrast to what Jacob Freeman told YouTuber Daniel Owen. Jacob is an engineer at NVIDIA who reached out to Daniel Owen because of Daniel's concerns about DLSS 5 tech. And here is what Jacob Freeman said in an email to Daniel. Saw some of your latest videos and wanted to clear up some of the questions that you brought up, or happy to answer any others that you may have. With DLSS 5, the underlying geometry and textures are unchanged. So already, this completely contradicts what...
Yeah, the geometry and textures are unchanged, which obviously they would be, because otherwise you need special circumstances, right? You don't need more than just your GPU. Now you're going to need to install a mod, and this is being touted as not a mod. This is just the thing that your GPU is going to do. It's very disingenuous.
Jensen Huang said about how DLSS 5 is applied at the geometry level. And then this continues. What is DLSS 5 doing? It reconstructs lighting to add effects like subsurface scattering, proper occlusion, fine grain hair lighting, and rim lighting using game color and motion vectors. Enhances PBR, which stands for physically based rendering properties on materials, roughness, more realism, with more realistic interaction of light. This applies to the entire scene, not just NPCs. And then in terms of developer control, Jacob highlights how developers can tweak the intensity of DLSS 5 alpha blending to control the mix between the original engine frame and the model's enhanced output. They can tweak the color grading, adjustments for contrast, saturation, and gamma to maintain the desired visual look of the game.
I'm wondering if this is going to come with like a set of sliders built into your Nvidia Control Center or something like that, where you can toggle the intensity and the color grading as the viewer maybe sees fit, because maybe apply a little bit and not specifically in the examples that they presented in their announcement. Maybe if you can do this in a more nuanced way, you can to something that looks a little bit upscaled, but not abandoning the studio and the developer's artistic vision. I could probably put a stamp of approval on that, but also there's no control over who uses it that way. But also, personal preferences would play a part in this. Would I run out and try to get a new graphics card that can do this? Hell no.
Game. And finally, masking off specific objects or areas of the screen where the DLSS 5 effect should not be applied. And then the statement concludes with, the other important part to mention is DLSS 5 is not a replacement for ray tracing or path tracing, etc. It enhances the underlying asset and lighting, so the better the lighting, the better the overall scene will be after DLSS 5 is applied. And they insist that they're working closely with all game developers on implementation to ensure it meets their artistic intent with the goal of more realistic lighting and material interaction. Now, Daniel immediately had some follow-up questions about this technology. Kudos to Daniel for asking these questions. The first big question that he asked was, my biggest question is whether or not this model is effectively taking a single 2D frame as an input with motion vectors to create the output frame. This then relates to some clarifying questions about the information you provided, which I ask below. We'll get to that in a bit. But the big question here is, does this technology actually work at the geometry level on a 3D level, or does it take a single 2D frame as an input to create the output frame that is essentially a glossed over frame with AI slot?
One's in chat if you think that it's just gonna be a 2D filter.
Filter on top. And the response that Jacob Freeman provided couldn't be clearer. He straight up said, yes, DLSS 5 takes a 2D frame plus motion vectors as input, which is the complete opposite of what Jensen Huang said when he stated it's not post-processing at the frame level, it's
womp womp womp.
generative control at the geometry level. They're literally saying two completely different things. And I trust the engineer more than the CEO, if you ask me. Unless somehow it's Jacob Freeman who's got his wires crossed. But if Jacob Freeman is speaking the truth here in saying that DLSS 5 takes a 2D frame plus motion vectors as input, then Jensen Huang either is fully ignorant about the very technology that he's leading the charge of.
And I doubt this. I think Jensen Huang understands exactly what's going on here. And also, Jensen Huang, as being the face of his own brand, is highly vested in spinning this in a very positive light and selling.
Or he just full on lied. Here's the second question from Daniel. You say the underlying geometry and textures are unchanged. Again, a stark contrast to what Jensen Huang said about how it's generative control
direct contradiction
at the geometry level. On top of saying that DLSS 5 fuses controllability of the geometry and textures and everything about the game with generative AI. That's not what this engineer is saying when he's saying that the underlying geometry and textures are unchanged. The question continues, is the model actually aware of things like 3D geometry, 3D depth, etc., or is it essentially just looking at a 2D image and then reinterpreting it, similar to taking a screenshot of a game and asking an AI model to enhance the screenshot?
And that's what it's essentially doing. It's just doing that frame by frame in real time, which probably takes up a lot of GPU power, which it doesn't surprise me that they had two beastly units running that. That takes a lot of compute.
To make it more realistic, basically, does DLSS 5 reinterpret individual frames, or does it actually reinterpret the in-game assets? And it seems as though it's the former, with Jacob Freeman responding with, DLSS 5 is trained end-to-end to understand complex scene semantics such as characters, hair, fabric, and translucent skin, along with environmental lighting conditions like frontlit, backlit, or overcast. And here's the key part, all by analyzing a single frame. It's not
Dun dun dun! And the truth was revealed.
looking at the guts of the game itself. It's just analyzing everything based on the frame that is shown on screen, and then like making its conclusions and making its adjustments based on what that single frame is showing and based on what DLSS 5 interprets off of that frame. And it does so for every frame that is output by the game. So if your game's running at 60 frames per second, once again, a complete contradiction to Jensen Huang's own claim that it's not post-processing at the frame level. Then we have question 3 from Daniel, who asks, you say...
And I understand, why Jensen Huang might actually do something like this, because it doesn't sound very good when you just say, oh yeah, this shit's analyzing frame by frame and just the AI is just enhancing as it thinks that it should, like per each frame. Honestly, they didn't show a lot of video footage with this running, but I know all of you have seen AI videos at this point and you know how strange they can look. Can you imagine playing an entire game that was like that? Unless this is just really, really consistent. And what's about to show right here, I think you might get that that weird it's like a weird almost like a ripply effect where different details are going in and out of existence in AI video. It's getting better over time, but it's still definitely there. This is what the game will look like with this filter on it. Unless they've made some insane leaps and bounds, your source version of the game is going to still be probably the best experience that you can have. I don't see that this is going to be a filter that is going to be comfortable to look at for hours on end, for if you're playing a game that you're really into the story and you just got to keep going, you got to keep going. I might even feel kind of motion sick from looking at that for a prolonged period of time. It seems like it'd be really unpleasant.
That with DLSS 5, the underlying geometry and textures are unchanged. However, in one of the publicly available examples, it looks like a character grew hair in a place where it didn't exist before,
Yeah, I did.
highlighting this Starfield screenshot where you can see right here, when DLSS 5 is off, the sides actually are completely shaved off, but with DLSS on, you can see that there is indeed additional hair that's been ingrown that DLSS 5 decided to implement.
It
And something else I
changes
want
the
to
shape
highlight
of
that I
his
just
nose.
noticed about this image is that the left nostril here, or his right nostril,
Yeah.
you can see that it ends at about here.
Yeah, so my to articulate my point a little bit more, this is a still image that we're looking at. So if you're looking at video where the AI is frame by frame trying to figure out where it needs to fill in the gaps to make that fidelity pop, you're going to see probably the nose going from, maybe the original shape to this really weird shape that we see here on the right, and going maybe back and forth because the AI is trying to, is trying to figure that out. I think that it just like seems like there'd be a lot of opportunity there with the way that this is working for us to see those little kinds of shifts that make AI video so strange. Yeah, the idea of playing a game with that in it for hours sounds awful.
And the rest of this is shadow, but DLSS 5 interprets the nostril as being bigger than it is because it thought the shadow here is part of the actual nostril, so it extended the nostril size and the nose's size with it if you look at the left here. And it feels like that's something that wouldn't happen if DLSS 5 was analyzing the game at the geometry level and not just looking at...
If it was on the geometry level, it would know what geometry shapes were. They're there in the assets.
Things frame by frame. But yeah, Daniel insists here that this seems to be a change to the model geometry and or textures rather than just an enhancement of the lighting. In other words, it seems like an AI image generator reinterpreting the character, which can cause actual details to be changed, as we clearly can see with our own two eyes, especially the Grace example here, where these two do not look the same at all. I mean, scrolling down here and doing the sliding comparison, you can tell that, I mean, Grace's character model just looks incredibly yassified, and you can barely recognize her from the game that you played. She's more recognizable in this screenshot right here, but even then, you can tell how much more yassified she is when DLSS 5 is turned on. So yeah, there are clear changes to geometry and textures and actual details.
So good
it also
this.
appears, Daniel continues, like some characters gain makeup that the original model did not seem to be wearing, which seems like changing the underlying texture. The response that Jacob Freeman provided was that the underlying geometry is unchanged. Also worth mentioning, this is a very early preview of the tech. Once again, a complete contradiction to Jensen Huang's claims that DLSS 5, the generative control happens at the...
I'm not feeling very confident about later versions of this tech, and I feel like I'm really sick of hearing the constant promise of it being better. Show me this when it's good. And show me this when it provides like a real value add to my experience, because otherwise, like I have a feeling this is going to be used to push new graphics cards. The promise is going to be, well, you know, when we make it better, you'll be able to use that better thing because you upgraded. That's your reward. And it's I don't know, I feel like it sets us up for disappointment. I'm already disappointed. And again, like this is just, they didn't partner with the devs on this, and I feel like that's kind of shitty. I don't know. I don't want a TikTok filter for my games. Yeah, I don't I don't.
Geometry level. But this was Jacob's way of trying to say that the geometry actually hasn't been changed, even though it looks that way. But he specifically says the underlying geometry is unchanged. But that doesn't mean that whatever layer of visual, whatever filter is added on top through turning on DLSS 5 on, doesn't actually change the details. It may not be underlying changes, but at the frame level, there might be some changes happening because of either Gen AI hallucinations or Gen AI just not being able to interpret the original artist's intent, and it applies.
Yeah, that what he just said there with Gen AI not being able to interpret the original artist's intent, like that speaks volumes because AI will never be able to do that. Humans cannot do that for other humans. The fact that, like, you know, it feels like this technology is definitely trying to do that, where it's trying to, like, oh yeah, we understand what the devs were trying to do here, the feel they were trying to give this scene. All we need to do is pump up the fidelity. And look, it's better now. It will never get there. I don't care how much, I don't care if you have 4 5090s in your rig to pull this off. It is never going to understand the intent of the original artist behind those projects.
Applying the same slop that it'll apply to every game because all of it comes from the same AI model. Then we have question 4 from Daniel, which asks, you say it enhances physically based rendering properties on materials. Is it aware of the physically based rendering properties by reading them from the game engine in some way, or is it just looking at the output image, the frames, and inferring them? In other words, it is my understanding that game artists traditionally tell a shader what specific parts of a 3D model look like by giving it properties like metallic, roughness, normal maps to simulate bumpiness, etc. Is DLSS 5 taking those artist-created values as inputs, or is it inferring them from something more like the final output image? Is it just analyzing the frame, or is it getting into the guts of the game and analyzing the information within those guts? And the answer, once again, is very clear from Jacob Freeman. DLSS 5 only takes the rendered frame and motion vectors as inputs. Materials are inferred from the rendered frame. Basically, DLSS 5 looks at a frame.
Yeah, this is a absolutely hard stop on this, like, because this will never be anything more than just a filter that lays over the top of it. It will never give any concern about what the artistic vision of the game was or is. And even when we like speculating that maybe they might have like sliders where you can adjust the intensity of this, I still feel like this is never going to be like kind to to original visions of artists. It's just not.
And then tries to infer what materials are present based on what it's looking at on a frame-by-frame basis, rather than taking that direct input from the game's values and information and data itself. Once again, a complete contradiction to this notion that it's not post-processing at the frame level. For all of Jensen Huang's confidence in saying, well, first of all, they're completely wrong, it actually sounds like everyone's first impression of this technology was dead on the money. Daniel continues with,
yeah, turns out we were all right from the start. Well, of course we were.
Question 5, which asks about the level of control that developers will have over DLSS 5's effects
The answer is probably
on
none.
a game's aesthetic. It reads right here, when you describe the tools the developers have to control the model, it does not sound like there is actually a lot of control over the DLSS 5 model's interpretation of the artistic intent of a scene beyond color grading or turning DLSS 5 off or down on some or all elements of the scene. Kind of like how with an Instagram filter, you can decide the level of intensity with which to apply that Instagram filter, but without any real high degree levels of control over individual aspects of the output of the filter. Daniel continues, for example, in the opening scene of Resident Evil Requiem, Grace is a character with a lot of trauma who is reluctantly on her way to investigate a murder in the same location where her mother was murdered several years earlier. With DLSS 5 off, I get more of that impression of the character. With DLSS 5 on, while she does seem to have more photorealistic lighting and skin, it also looks like she's wearing makeup that was not present in the original version. This gives off a very different impression of the character and emotional impact of the scene. Can developers actually control anything about the output image besides color grading? If they see the DLSS 5 output and want to tweak it, like asking it to not apply makeup to the character, are they able to do so? These are all fantastic.
Yeah, because I mean, in those two photos, like in one photo, she looks like, like no makeup, like low maintenance kind of girl, and then in the photo, like she full on is like full face of makeup, collagen injections in the lips, all of that, and it's like, that's a different vibe altogether. That's not the same.
Ask the questions, and the response that Daniel got reads as follows from Jacob Freeman. Developers will have detailed controls such as intensity and color grading. Artists can use these controls to adjust blending, contrast, saturation, and gamma, and determine where and how enhancements are applied to maintain the game's unique aesthetic. Developers can also mask specific objects or areas to be excluded from enhancement. We continue to talk to developers to understand all of the ways they'd like to control the technology. Ultimately, we see DLSS 5 as a tool for them to achieve their artistic vision rather than be limited by the capabilities of traditional real-time rendering. So it doesn't really answer the question, which suggests to me that they can't be specific about the level of control they have over DLSS 5 by asking it things like, okay, do these things but don't apply makeup. It just sounds like DLSS 5 applies the visual filter that it thinks a frame needs, and then from there, developers can decide on the intensity of it and certain aspects like saturation and gamma, and can decide that certain parts of the scene shouldn't have DLSS 5 applied to it, but they can't ask DLSS 5 to do something specific like don't apply makeup to the character. So
yeah, so this is going to be, it's sounding to me, I'm speculating again, but that's why we're doing these videos. It sounds to me like this is going to be an on-off toggle that appears in games just like ray tracing. It'll be on the list, probably right above ray tracing. You want your ray tracing on or off? Cool. You want your DLSS 5 on or off? Cool. You want your grace with makeup? And like you said, yeah, character's face and personality don't match up. Yeah, like if you, I guess if you want your yassified characters, then you turn it on or you turn it off. This doesn't feel like it's going to give developers much leeway as far as how it transforms. Yeah, I'm not confident about this feature.
actually sounds like developers have fairly limited control over DLSS 5's final output. Then we have question 6 from Daniel, which asks, is this model limited to screen space, or does it have any awareness of the environment outside of what is visible in an individual game frame? Basically asking if DLSS 5 is aware of the environment around the frame that is shown, or does it only know what the frame is showing? Does it have spatial awareness, or does it just look at where the camera is pointing at in the game? The response from Jacob was pretty simple, reiterating that DLSS 5 only takes the rendered frame and motion vectors as inputs. It is not spatially aware. And that explains why in the demos we have seen of DLSS 5 from media outlets and news outlets and influencers who got to cover DLSS 5, every time DLSS 5 would get turned on, the presenter would either always stand still or move very slow and controlled. He would turn off DLSS 5 first, then move to a different in-game location, and then turn it on instead of keeping DLSS on while there's a lot.
Yeah, this is something to watch for with this in the future, because there's a reason why they did not show any prolonged video footage for this feature, because it probably doesn't look good. It probably looks like the full-on Coca-Cola AI-generated cartoon commercial thing that was atrocious. There's probably very bizarre artifacting that happens because the AI is specifically is just going from frame to frame. It doesn't have context at all. It has pixels and data from the frame to work with. It probably doesn't have anything else.
Of mobility happening, likely due to the way the technology works. It's not spatially aware, so as you turn around, you will see some visual flaws. In fact, people have already pointed out that, during motion, when DLSS 5 is turned on, right here we have Nick Tech, who said, I did come across some artifacts with UI elements, character popping out of the UI element, and ghosting / artifacts behind the character. So it further goes to highlight that DLSS 5 does not work at the geometry level. It's not looking at the values of the game itself. It's not looking at the game's guts. It's just analyzing the game frame by frame. And so yeah, this made plenty of headlines, and Twitter itself has a topic on this because so many people started talking about this new development. The headline of this topic reads, Nvidia confirms DLSS 5 uses single frame and motion vectors. Spotlighting the fact that DLSS 5, from what Jacob Freeman said, an engineer from Nvidia, that DLSS 5 infers materials and lighting without accessing 3D geometry or depth data, offering developers sliders and masks for control. So yeah, people are calling out Jensen Huang for saying buzzwords like neural rendering and content control, generative AI, and generative control at the geometry level, none of which seems to be true if the engineer is to be believed. Top comments include people basically highlighting how it's all a lie, it's basically a filter LMAO, so on and so forth. Basically,
it is a filter. Saying,
that's exactly so we were right, and we were gaslit into believing that DLSS 5 was doing more than we perceived it to do based on what we've been shown through marketing so far. And it all further explains why every single showcase of DLSS 5 across different games, all of them, the end result of DLSS 5 being turned on was exactly the same visual style, exactly the same Gen AI slop, waxy, plasticky aesthetic that is just widely known when it comes to the output that Gen AI produces as far as realistic or photorealistic images are concerned. And in fact, it's been confirmed that the AI model powering DLSS 5 is a single unified model, same model for every game. It's not trained per title, per face, or per object. And so, yeah, we knew about this before, and people already questioned why are NVIDIA claiming developers have full control over the artistic intent of DLSS 5 output when it uses a unified model that isn't trained per game. Now, it's still early days for the technology. Maybe down the line, it can develop to a degree where it can do more of what Jensen Huang claims. But right now, this is the information that we have. And what this information is telling us is that Jensen Huang completely overhyped DLSS 5 and straight up completely lied about its current capabilities. Unless there's additional context that we're missing that Jacob Freeman failed to provide.
This feels like it's
unless
entirely
Jensen
oversold.
Huang has more to add to this whole situation, there's no other way to interpret the situation other than Jensen Huang lied about the inner workings of the tech, tried to gaslight people into believing that they were wrong about what they were seeing with their own two eyes. And all of this is an incredibly bad look on top of already incredibly awful optics. I'll be very curious to see how all of this further develops, but in the meantime, this is all we know. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on everything shared by Jacob Freeman, thanks to questions asked by Daniel Owen in the comments below. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on YongYea.
All right, so yeah, if you guys want to hear or YongYea's done a handful of videos on this already. I do recommend checking out the one that he did right before this one, where he goes over specifically what like devs had to say, and a lot of that. I think it's a worthwhile watch. The devs were not very happy about this because they were essentially blindsided by this announcement. It's not something that they knew was coming out, and nor do they have any hand in the say of what footage of their games was being used in the advertisement or the announcement for Nvidia. They were not in the loop of this at all. And so what we're seeing of this is it just looks like it's just this like slop filter to go over the top of everything. And I'm sick of seeing this. I think this isn't a good argument for something that like AI should be used for. And then the more slop that we pump into the space, the worse that opinion is on AI in general. Because if all you're seeing is like shitty AI art and hearing about how artists and books and authors and stuff have had their things stolen to train models, like nobody's going to have a good opinion on this tech. It's crazy to me that a company that has such a large investment in this tech at this point is also not invested in highlighting some really good things that AI can do, and maybe focusing to bring those out more and make those like publicly available. I've heard of AI helping with medical advancements, but and I think I am currently, full disclosure, I currently use Claude. I am building an AI like assistant companion kind of a thing that I think would be cool to use as like a sidekick kind of character on the channel. I'm mulling around with that idea. But I don't know if I will ever actually do this, but it's just some things that I'm considering. As I said, like, I'm not opposed to AI, the tech across the board. I think right now we're in the infancy of this technology. We didn't know about any of this before, like, 2023? Like, none of this shit was even around. And so right now, like, things just kind of feel messy, I think, where it's it's an unregulated industry. It's we're experiencing the price gouging on computer components. I don't know about your neighborhood, but pretty close to mine, not too far away, we had city council meetings where people were protesting the building of a data center, and it's not really necessarily affecting my home per se, but I don't know if it could in the future. And there's a lot of negativity around this, and for good reason. I think something like DLSS 5 absolutely does nothing to enhance or change anybody's mind on AI tech as a whole. It doesn't. It's not doing any lifting on on building the reputation up. It is the opposite. It's just showing us that, like, hey, you can have this tech that is just kind of like unnecessary, and it makes everything more expensive. And these are the kind of things that drive the disdain. It makes the game look worse, in your opinion? Yeah, and I think you're right. Yeah, it does make the game look worse. It takes games that were already really, really pretty and were fantastic at the fidelity levels that they were, makes them, in my opinion, just adds this like shitty TikTok filter over the top of them. And this is not an AI product that I see myself using in the future. That's my final thoughts on this. This one's not for me. I'll give this one a hard pass.